So getting back to these guys here, these are the creme de la creme of basically someone who created some of our most favorite films. Martin Scorsese, we have George Lucas, we have Steven Spielberg, and of course the Don himself. You know what I'm trying to say? Francis Ford Coppola. And they are slamming comic book movies.
Let's do a quick. I'm gonna do a quick thing. Say that years before, not too many years before this, Steven Spielberg and George Lucas said the blockbuster is dead, like it's dying out. Mm-hmm. So that was the first sentiment. While Marvel Studios was just blowing up, and then even Transformers is blowing up. Yeah. There's so many movies that are making money, but they were saying that basically like it's like peak oil, saying that we're in the downswing of this sort of industry. And at the same time, now Martin Scorsese basically said this was not cinema, right? And then Francis Ford Coppola said they're despicable. So ultimately, as popular movies go, we have to accept criticism. We have to allow it to sit there and fester and grow, but that's the problem. Criticism is one thing, and they're filmmakers. They're not film critics, but obviously as a filmmaker, you can be, you don't like criticism, but then you criticize. So they're not really the people that should be saying what's cinema. I mean, they can say what it is, but that you're supposed to leave the criticism saying what is and what's not more for the critics, because they're saying critics don't make movies, they criticize. So filmmakers,
because they can't.
That's the thing. So then when you join the market of being a critic, then it's kind of then that's what happens. I'm saying as critics go, critics say their criticism, and no one says, hey, look, you can't even make a movie, so shut the hell up. No, they let it sit there.
Right.
That's why I initially was like, it's okay for them to say that. But then once you criticize as a filmmaker, that thing brings in all of the people talking about the Last Temptation of Jesus Christ, talking about every bomb that Francis Ford Coppola made, that sort of thing.
But we don't even have to go that far, my friend.
Don't?
We don't. You know what I'm trying to say? You don't have to criticize it on the they had bombs, because it's anybody in a career that's going to have ups and downs.
That's what people are
doing.
Right, but I'm not saying what I'm doing.
Total wrong. I'm not saying you, but I'm saying it's the total wrong tact. I'm
saying you can't stop them from doing that.
I know, but I'm saying what you need to look at is exactly. And filmmakers have strong ideas and visions, and they were created based on the time frame they grew up on, and the type of movies they were, and the type of background that they come from. And there's nothing wrong. We love some of their movies. We love the Godfather movies. We love the Goodfellas movies.
We don't love Godfather 3.
Okay. That's a generational issue, okay?
No, it's
because there's some younger people. A lot of younger people like it. So listen, we're not going to go into that again. We got Spielberg.
I was the generation that it should have worked for, and it didn't. With this generation after me that liked it,
clearly. So then So the point
you're in my generation, you know that.
Clearly not. But the key thing that we're talking about here is that I remember talking to my family, and they were talking about my uncles and they were talking about how the Westerns were the only type of movie around, and Westerns dominated everything. I remember talking to my grandfather, he thought Westerns were just a waste of time, why we're always there. And then you had the whole crime, and this is what some of these guys, like Scorsese and Francis Ford Coppola, made their bones on the crime films, basically, right? And that's just a genre that's just not quite as popular now as it was previously. It's moved on to TV, like you said, the police procedurals and stuff like that. This is just another genre that's very popular right now, the superhero films, right? And people who weren't used to that, who didn't read, weren't really big into the comic books, they just can't get into that. The same way that back in the 70s and 60s, it was the what do you call it? The westerns, 60s and 50s.
Westerns?
Westerns, that's what I meant, the westerns. Westerns was huge. There was a point where westerns were all over on TV, and that's the point I'm trying to make. It's just a generational change where they have different people. Now they can do so much more stuff with the sci-fi element and the comics, where there's tons of writing where people enjoyed reading, and then the current filmmakers, the current crop of filmmakers grew up on a lot of this stuff. So for them, it's not like, oh, this is horrible. It's just something that they were able to express. The same way the westerns was the lone man standing up against the system.
Well, it's funny because the cop film is almost something that,
A derivative of the Western to a
It's a
degree.
derivative of the Western because the gangster films were more popular than obviously any sort of police work. The police films were more detective films. I think it's like a movie called Laura, where instead of having a cop, you'd have a detective who could do more things that didn't have to be in a certain costume, sort of check in with the boss sort of thing, someone that work freely. But one of the things is there's the fact that superhero genre is one that sort of merges everything in one. It has some police, like sort of authority, force. It has some aspects of the Western because it's outside of the law, and it has some of the romance bits that can be in a romance film. Like what Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko did with the comic genre, they made it like the multi-super genre that had everything in one. And one of the things that when you go to these films, and you have to and cinema is cinema. And that's what, and I'm going to just do a simple example because Chris McQuarrie was talking about
The director.
The director, Chris McQuarrie, was talking about the people who work on the Fast and Furious movies, and how they start their movies with stunts. And I think Chris McQuarrie at that point was writing his script first, and then he was doctoring it as it went on what they needed, and then he started working differently where he went from location. But he was like, it's different from how I think how they work. And that's the same for the people who do the Marvel Studios film. Now, the big issue that I'm pretty sure Martin Scorsese has is that it has the big father of the big ruler of this is Disney. So there is some rules, some notes, and stuff they want to see.
It's a formula.
And then it's like, borrowing from other films, that sort of thing, is saying that's what he could, and just assuming what he's saying is not cinema. But when you hear Chiwetel Ejiofor was talking about doing the Doctor Strange movie, and now Doctor Strange is a good movie. Who knows where you put it in your hot quality between like Superman the movie or maybe even the dark revisionist sort of superhero movies. But he was talking about the scene where things are going backwards and they're going forwards.
Right.
And he was saying this is the most complicated filmmaking that he had to do because it took a long amount of time. He has to remember what he's doing in the scene, all this stuff, all these elements come into play, just so when we watch it, we don't think this is BS. And there's so much aspects to movie making and cinema and or narrative that's going on in superhero films that they have to make it believable, so you don't just say, this is just lights and what. Like the like people go through the Transformers film, but even in that, there's a lot of, with the digital effects, making this thing interact with as bad as I would say the Transformers movie, when you see the Transformers on the side of a building and they're doing these jokes, this thing, making those things believable, is a little too jokey, but it's making this stuff seem real. That's why Bumblebee falls into everything.
And I agree with you 100% with that. It takes I think they downplay where they're like, well, it's a machine. Disney's a machine, and Disney's able to pump this stuff out, the same thing. But you know what? You're right. Hollywood had a machine back in the 30s and the 40s when they had the same, right, where they were doing the exact same thing where they were pumping out. Now, what you're talking about, this is a formula. These are corporations that are making movies, and they're making movies that are popular for people. People don't have to go to these movies. I mean, let's take a look at an example as the Transformer movies. They spend a lot of money on those movies. And while some of them have been very good, the latter batch has not. But hold on one second. Okay. They've been popular outside the States. But people have here, if it wasn't because of the international market, some of those movies never would have been made. You know what I'm trying to say? But that's what I'm trying to say. That you have a system, and it doesn't necessarily take away from the artistic value of it or what people are doing. But we also understand that most movies aren't always going to be geared towards trying to get an Oscar or something like that. Yeah, yours is more the classical where people are talking in a room. It's just you, two actors, a script. Yeah. But this is a different form of it. And there's nothing necessarily to downgrade it. It's just a different form. Just like we have radio, now we have podcasting. They're both talking spoken word, right? Yeah. And it's just a different format that they're going through. But it's still, basically, you're still entertaining people. Yeah. Well, that's all I'm trying to say. Come on, let's just Guys, give me a break. You guys are trying to act like old fogies. And George Lucas shouldn't even talk. George Lucas created all this stuff.
He was more about the blockbuster. And the thing is that the hard part, these guys should understand that since they've done popular films, I guess you can say Francis Ford Coppola is seen as doing more of the art that was successful.
And Scorsese too.
Well, I mean, Scorsese has a string of quality films that weren't big blockbuster movies. So he was out of the blockbuster thing until you get to Goodfellas, where you get later, where you start. But he was doing all this classic film cinema that wasn't stuff. It wasn't that huge. You would get the awards. Oh, that's the thing. He didn't get the award till late, but at the same time, he was his ability was undeniable, and his notoriety was undeniable. Everyone knew who he was. It was just like De Niro isn't making the huge money until he goes and does the popular films. And that's the thing. The popular films are what's going to fuel your art films. The only problem is that the art films, you still have to nickel and dime. People keep thinking if you get rid of, and I'm saying, we keep bringing up Transformers. Let's say we get rid of the Marvel Studios films, and people just stop going to the cinema. They're not going to just decide, all right, I'm going to go see, My Left Foot or something like that. It's not going to transfer that money. People keep thinking if we guilt the people into understanding what's better at filmmaking, like the same with like complaining about like a Tyler Perry movie, that slowly they'll stop watching these bad movies and then they'll see. That's what Spike Lee was doing. I'm going to guilt you from watching a Tyler Perry movie, and then you'll go see a Spike Lee movie. Then I would always go to like the She Hate Me, and then I'm not sure as far as the filmmaking itself is strong, but the story it was telling was kind of all over the place.
But Petey, but here, I mean, and I don't want to belittle this, but I'm just saying people have a finite amount of money and time to watch and enjoy certain things. And people are going to take that money that they have and they're going to place it in places where they want to be entertained. Whether you're a huge basketball fan or baseball fan, you will pay for that content, right? Mm-hmm. And the same thing goes with Marvel. There's a huge audience who likes this particular type of film, and they will pay for it. Even we've seen, I'm not going to say some studio stuff has not been up to Marvel level, but some of that stuff has been popular. We weren't crazy. I personally wasn't crazy about Joker, but the very fact that there's a lot of people out there who did like the movie. I don't think that the standard Disney fan, the standard Marvel fan will actually like the Joker movie, but the very fact, there goes, if that's what you want to talk about, art house film kind of quality, that's it there. The comic book genre lends itself to putting these characters in all types of roles. You know, you don't have to have...
Well, because it's a multi-genre thing.
So
you
I
can
think
do westerns, you can travel to time.
And they have characters in all types of things. Especially if you read comics, you've seen this in everything. You know? So all we're saying is, dude, get a hold, man. That's all I'm trying to say. Get a freaking hold.
We also have to understand...
Don't act like old fogies, bro.
There's also something which is called a comic book movie. And that isn't connected to being superhero movies, but it's a negative term.
Like what movie you consider a comic book movie that isn't connected?
I'm going to use it's in a book from William Goldman, who's a screenwriter, and he says a comic book movie is basically I should have it with me, but the criteria is I don't have it online, but I'm going to use the aspect of what I call, when I start saying people are bulletproof, that sort of stuff. That sort of thing. So with a comic,
that's a comic book. That can be a western too.
No.
You know?
No. The thing is, if you think about it like this, like even in The Unforgiven, right?
Yeah.
Like the character's in bad shape, like towards the middle of the movie. Mm-hmm. At the end, there's some layers of like that's what the hero's journey isn't considered a comic book movie. Like the aspect of people dying, that sort of thing. People like the thing William Goldman used as an example was. So was it Sophie's? Is it Sophie's
Choice?
With was that with De Niro? Oh man.
What about Chariots of Fire?
No, the Deer Hunter. That's it. The Deer Hunter.
You know, Chariots of Fire.
He used the Deer Hunter as an example of a comic book movie, because Christopher Walken is, he's overseas. He's playing Russian roulette, and hasn't lost yet. It's like he's doing it. He just keeps winning. He's going crazy. So De Niro goes out there to save him. He finds him in 2 seconds. He's there. So De Niro is the hero of the movie.
Right.
So when he sits down with Christopher Walken, they do Russian roulette. Who's going to win? De Niro.
Exactly.
So that's where he's saying there's no layers to it. Even if you have this great filmmaking in The Deer Hunter, the weakness of it is that at the end of the day, De Niro's a hero in this. He's not saying I'm not playing Russian roulette because I could die. They know that De Niro's gonna, what's the name is at the end of his rope. He wants to die.
Okay, but I'm not still saying why that's comic booky, Petey.
Because there's no way, if you can look at
But you can look at tons of characters in TV shows that you can...
No, at some point you have to forget. You'll forget, and you'll worry about the character in the movie, right? Mm-hmm. That's the thing. Yes, popular movies, you have the simplest subject matter, but it's a negative term. So once you have a superhero film, that's like a comic book movie exponentially. Like, it's not...
Right.
So that's the thing with...
Iron Man died, bro.
Huh? No,
he died for our sins.
That doesn't. I would think the thing is like that still works that works under committee, because it's like, all right, when you go through this fight, and that's a hard thing to do, because you're trying to make this feel real. You're trying to make, and the easy way to do this is use. I'm trying to think of a movie that I could explain this by, that everyone knows. But one of the things...
Chariots of Fire?
Or no, like giving you the semblance of
Kramer
realism.
versus Kramer?
No, like Rocky 3. Like Rocky 3, Mickey dies. You're not really sure that he was going to... Oh my God. Mickey dies, so it gives you the thing of somebody... I'm trying to... Gives you the idea that these characters could pass away. Even though the fight itself, the second fight, is totally like movie making, it's trying to give you the semblance of reality. Like there's some, like he could die.
And he comes back and fights for the Gipper. I get it. I get it. But I'm just saying, but Mickey was like 900 years old, so he was going to die. I don't. Okay, I see what you're saying.
No, but now you're just trying to debate. I'm saying that.
I'm not trying to. I see what you're saying. I just threw that out there. See what
I'm saying, like, if you regretfully, I'm going to use something that you don't really know that much about as far as a comic book that isn't a comic booky sort of thing,
right.
Like the Alpha Flight or the Watchmen. Let's use the Watchmen, right? Mm-hmm. In the Watchmen, it has some aspect of that, but the most interesting character dies in the beginning of the story, right? And then as you go along, Dr. Manhattan goes through something that's pretty terrible. You find out that some of these other people have been killed. Ozymandias is an attempt on his life. Rorschach dies in the end. Like the villain, he somehow overdosed, and it's saying, so there's a semblance of reality in this thing. And that's what people feel when they go in there. It's like, all right, who's going to win? Oh, Superman's going to win because of this. They don't understand when they look at the Superman movie, when they get to the part where he reverses time, he's been in a place where, as powerful he is, he can't stop what happened here. He can't stop his father from passing. And as the audience, they play the trick on us because we don't want Lois to die. So we allow him to reverse time and fix things because we, the audience, are like, no, we can't have him lose. We see how terrible that was, and we don't want that. And it's playing to the audience. The same thing happens in like the Karate Kid. Because Karate Kid.
Okay, I got the points that you're making. I understand what you're saying.
Can I finish what I'm saying, or no? All right, you go.
No, I'm just saying I got it, P.
So that's the aspect of understanding what more a comic book movie is. Someone where you see the person come in, the nerdy character punches out the bully. He never sort of loses. Like even the 8 Mile. 8 Mile is a good comic book movie because what's the name has a struggle, but ultimately he's able to pull the bully down on the car. He wins in the end. The other guy doesn't even say a rhyme at the end of 8 Mile. So
okay, I have to.
So that's what I
disagree, but
what do you mean?
I said
Well,
let's get back to
this.
this.
Keep saying disagree just to say it, and then go on to something else. Go
Right.
to
I don't
what
want to. This is
Go
the
to
big
what
debate.
else you wanna go
The key
to.
we're talking about is these guys here. What do you think about that, Petey? In terms of these guys,
I said what I felt about those guys. I said that I'm okay with the criticism. The only problem is that they're trying to guilt the audience out of going to see this, and then they already know that the studio system is in place. We don't see the studio as a studio anymore. We see it as, if I write a good film, it'll become a movie. And someone will pick it out of a crowd, pull it out the clutter, and they'll make a good movie. Mm-hmm. When it doesn't work like that. They have movies they want to make, and they have filmmakers that want to make their own movie. And somehow, if the filmmaker gets an award, there's a chance he or she can make the movie he wants to do, but at the same time, the studio has these movies they want to make. So if you look at, so ultimately, the studio will have to give in to a Martin Scorsese because he knows what works as a film. So like if he picks The Aviator, they'll be like, well, we don't know what market that'll work in, but you know how to make movies, and you have Leonardo DiCaprio. We have to trust you. But then if you have a bomb, then they're like, well, we want you, but we want you on our stuff.
Okay, so I'm a little confused. So probably, and this may be my ignorance in the industry.
No, I could be confusing.
No, you're not confusing. I'm just saying to the studio, why doesn't the studio, there are, to me, 1,000 directors in the country, and Marvel has a system. And Hallmark TV has a system where they do their movies. I'm like, why don't you just say, hey, why do I have to follow Scorsese, Lucas, or whatever you guys? Yeah, they made money, but you know what? They're demanding too much, and I have a formula, and this is what I'm going to do. Isn't that what Marvel does? They just touch their hand and say, this is the dude. Well, Marvel does it.
It's not TV.
But I'm just saying, but Marvel does it, right? Where you get these the directors who are not huge, most of them really small films, and they come and get chosen, and they say, hey, this is what I want you to do, and this is how you're going to do it. Work the system.
But the director's like this, right? If I come in to do TV, if I do an episode of Friends, I'm not going to be able to say, I want these scenes to happen outside. I want this to happen underground in the sewer. You can't just
All right, let's say a made-for-TV movie then.
No, I'm saying that's the thing. If as a filmmaker, the same with I don't know, like Tim Burton taking over Superman. Mm-hmm. He had his own ideas. The studio had a script, and they throw Kevin Smith's script out of here, and I want to do my story. I want Superman to be an outsider. I want him to be this, and they're like, oh yeah, Superman had a black costume. This could work. That Superman had long hair. This could work.
But the studio has to sign off on that.
They signed off on most of it.
Right. So that's what I'm saying. That's
and
a different story.
Then the buzz went the other. I'm saying the director coming in and wanting to do his film. And that's hasn't worked for the Marvel Studio films because the directors ultimately leave because they're like, well,
it's this Feige's thing. Feige's thing. Kevin Feige.
Well, I mean, like, him and the studio, they're like, we're hitting these points. Even if they're borrowing from other films, like they said, the similarities between the Black Panther and the Lion King over a bunch of movies. A lot of the scenes in the Lion King show up in the Black Panther's life. So that sort of aspect, or even say, but the director of Ant-Man, like ultimately leaving, like Joss Whedon ultimately leaving, and then
Joss Whedon is a little different. I mean, he was a much bigger, higher stature than most of the other directors that they've
But
got.
then that's the thing. He should be able to say, I want to take the Avengers this way, since he ultimately...
But he couldn't. But he went to DC until he had problems there.
Well, he was picking up the pieces of something where he couldn't restart the whole film. So that's the thing. He was able to change some of it, but he's not able to change the whole thing. So as a director, they're not going to call in Spielberg. This happened with Ron Howard doing a Solo.
He did a great job.
No, he picked up the pieces.
He did a great job.
You think can you see a difference from what it would have been?
I don't know.
Nobody knows.
Because unless we see the original cut. But what I got to say is that, did you enjoy the movie of Solo?
It was okay.
I thought it was one of the better ones. I'm sorry.
Better than what?
Better than Last Jedi.
Saying that is like saying, I just bunted and I got to first base. Saying anything is better than The Last Jedi.
I liked it better than Force Awakens.
I don't know about that.
I did.
Force Awakens had a little bit of wonder. It just may not hold up over
wonder.
time. So that's the thing. We have these things. Disney is pumping out. No, they're not actually pumping out these things because the schedule is just more spaced out now.
But the nature we're discussing is, in terms of these directors, is what is the nature of a director and how important it is they are in the scheme of things.
They're very important
You know?
because the director.
And that's
the director
but
and
that's
actors
exactly what
and lead actors know what movies work.
But that's what they're saying, basically, and that's what they're feeling. But clearly, there's a market that clearly doesn't agree with that, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
The
Marvel has been
studios
able-
will allow you to. That's the thing. Back in the '90s, they'd give you 3 picture deals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they give, I don't know, Ice Cube,
Terminator.
anybody would get a 3 picture deal. Spike Lee, that sort of stuff. You get a 3 picture deal. And if you're successful, it would work into you getting a multi-picture deal. You know, same with Master P. He had one, but he was still able to make films, but on a smaller scale. Even, let's say, Jay-Z and Dame Dash, they had a 3 picture deal. And you can waste that away. You can waste that away, and then they say, all right, your thing hasn't worked. You still have a star. We have something we want you to do. And that's what happens with a studio is like, they'll let you, and now they won't let you do that. You have to really prove yourself because, like Christopher Nolan has proven himself. He did the Batman films, which was successful. He did what's that thing? It's, yep, we had to. I've said the Inception. Inception. What every wife in America does to their husband, they go on levels so deep to get him to do the right thing. Inception was successful. The Dunkirk really pushed him over the top to say, you know what, let him do whatever he wants because he knows what the audience wants.
I saw Dunkirk. And
no, let's talk about the money.
No, I know, I get it. I'm
You don't go to the how.
I know.
It's saying the fact that if you're a success, it's not saying, well, I don't like. I don't like the Dark Knight.
I'm just saying that personally.
We're talking about something specific. We're not going to.
I get it. I'm just throwing in a comment, bro. It's just a comment, bro. Just don't take it like a war. You know. So, all right, I see your point about the directors.
So that's the thing. The directors, they want a little more control, but this is the Disney machine right now, right? The same complaints, comic book-wise, when the critics were like, well, no, it's tough because in the 80s, they were really critical of comic books, but at the same time...
They made a lot of money, though.
They made a lot of money, and they
movie.
pushed the... What do you mean?
The Tim Burton Batman movie, the Brendan Routh Superman movie made money. Whatever superhero movie.
That was. I mean, the thing
wasn't
is like
huge,
this.
but it did well.
The thing with people going. You're not supposed to go into. That's what the '80s sort of comic book said. You're not going in here to try to reinvent the wheel all the time.
Yeah.
It is the illusion of change. It is the illusion of loss. It's fantasy. So that you're not going in there and saying, oh, okay, here's Fantastic Four versus the Frightful Four. Who wins? It's how they do the story. It's like I guess sort of like Die Hard. And you have some elements which are, a family of injury with his feet being hurt, people thinking that maybe this guy is a terrorist, all this stuff of doubt to the end, him being proven that he was the right in his choices. Because he does some things like he throws, he shoots at a cop car. People think that he could be the guy. So it kind of has some layers. Even if you're guessing that Bruce Willis is going to win, there's some layers to getting to the end where he goes off with his wife. Even there's tension between him and his wife. He comes to a party that he's not really wanted, even though she wants to reconcile. He's being the jerk that he always is. So that's where you get your layers. And I think the comic book movies have that with the Stan Lee Kirby bickering that goes on there.
Yeah, we definitely see that in the characters. And I mean, it's just like classical music, where the different artists play their instruments, and popular music now, which is basically auto-tune, which both of us can sing it out and it sounds great. But
It's a wave, though. Michelangelo, the way he played Flow. So you didn't watch that show, did you?
Okay.
Hustle and Flow. But I think that's the thing. I'm okay with I'm not okay with the criticism because you're guilting the audience out of watching these films. And
the audience, their audience, who are watching the film are not caring. Either they are going to follow that, but most of them are not. The younger versions are
No,
not.
it's
and the
for
older ones-
us dummies that are going to it and saying, like, that's the thing. Like, when your parents say the comics aren't real or wrestling isn't real or that stuff, when you keep saying that to somebody and you're saying, well, I could go watch, I could watch The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, I can watch Raging Bull, I can go back into classic cinema. Because that's the thing, when kids start listening to stuff, you think some things are transitional, that you grow out of them. So
Right.
if you say, I'm the dummy that's watching this thing, and I keep hearing that this is no good. This is no good. If I read I'll read all of the reviews, and I say, wow, these Marvel movies are really taking a hit. Like, that's the thing. We go through them. This is gonna wear on you as an audience, and then
From these guys, if they had 10 million or 20 million
No, but you're now
Twitter
going to the
and
money.
Instagram. No, I'm just saying if they had 10 million
But I'm
Instagram
saying
or
you go
Twitter
through-
followers,
if you
then
go
yeah,
through
but
what-
I don't think that the standard audience is going to hear that. And probably that's what the audience they are actually talking to. They're probably talking to a
Movie
much
reviews are done on a thing without a scale of what the viewer likes. So they could. I don't, because I don't read reviews anymore. I haven't read them since I was an intern, and most of the time, it goes like you see Rotten Tomatoes. It's like the proof that this is good is that it's
The
certified,
social proof, yeah.
that sort of thing. But it's
Right.
like a twofold thing, and the same thing happened where the reviewers loved The Last Jedi and the viewers hated Last Jedi. So it's like, who are you going to believe? Ultimately, it wasn't good, but the reviewers went there, so you can't always trust them. But you can trust what you like, and that's one thing that I say is more important. If you want to go to them to get some insights and connecting to the history and what's similar and what they're using from the past in these films, I'm all for you going to the reviewers to check out films. But if you're going to them to say, what are the populace saying? And I look at the trailer and you like it and you say, well, everyone's saying it's terrible. I'm not going to go because, all these people that I appreciate say it's bad. That's what they're doing. They're trying to guilt you, and you're like, well, I think ultimately Scorsese and Coppola, they're pretty strong filmmakers. I think Spielberg is incredible. He does incredible popular films, and he's done solid art and historical films, that sort of thing. And even Lucas, as far as people give some things to the editing, but you had to have picking that talent for the first trilogy and having the content there for them to edit it and to make it into the effects. You had to have something there because it's not in just someone doing flashy things, because it's not even that flashy. They have long scenes in Star Wars that wouldn't fly now, that hit with the audience when you see the two robots in the sand, and it's a long sort of walk. So it's like, this is, if you can't, people were down on that initially. So I think that don't fall for the guilt. We can let's hash it out.
Not feeling guilty at all.
Let's hash it out. Let's argue it out. But the problem is that we don't get to talk to Martin Scorsese to hash it out and say, what would you say is bad? And that's so people have to go on Twitter and attack him.
What we need to do is give him a comic book movie and see what comic book movie he would make instead of talking about all this crap.
But why would the thing is like this?
Then-
if
then-
you give them that, it'd be like, it's basically giving like Frank Miller something where it's like, all right, I could do this, but I want to push the envelope. Let's have him kill this person.
Look
And
at the
they're
director
like,
for
wait,
the Joker. He's pushed that envelope, I think.
I don't think he pushed the envelope that hard. He could have made it. The thing is, like, was it Yasmine Bleeth? Is that the woman? There's a whole
For 90210.
No, the girl. Not that's what's it? Yaz, what's her name? Who played Domino?
Yeah, I know you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, the fact is that there's a whole online thing saying, what did the Joker do in the room with her? Did he kill her or
Did he?
not? But that's the thing. It would have pushed the audience a certain way if we saw him do something to her and the kid. Then we would really have not liked the Joker going into that end scene. So that would make it, and also if he killed the little person in the movie, Like we had a gag because it was that's really the strongest filmmaker in that he put the top chain on. So when you knew
something was up, that's
we
what
knew
I
that
figured.
the midget wouldn't get out. The little person couldn't get out regardless. We knew that was going to happen. So
What
it's
about
like,
height challenge? What about that?
no,
Why
it's
we
a
got
little
that?
person. That's what.
They want to be called little person. I don't think they
yeah.
want to be called little
Yes,
person.
they do.
No, I prefer.
No, you can't make up your own term for them. That's worse.
I'm making it up.
Yeah, you
Height
can.
challenge. That's it. Vertically challenged. That's it.
Oh my God,
What's we call little
Mr.
person?
Mr. PC over here. Mr. PC is not even allowing the little people to make up their own names. But as we go through this, the thing is that you could have, say you give something to Martin Scorsese.
Yes.
He's going to decide, you know what, he's going to try to push it further. He's probably going to look at things and, you know, that's the idea. He wants to make, he's going to want to make his mark on there and find a different way. When you can see in Superman, the movie, like Richard Donner was almost trying to make it live in the same realm as the New York that we saw in those films. It wasn't something that was, it was strong cinema that could exist in the 70s with the films that were out then. So,
Well, I mean, and I'm glad we're bringing that up. I know we're a little overlong on this, but I always thought, and this is just me personally, that Francis Ford Coppola would be an excellent director for the Legion of Doom. You know,
the Legion of Doom.
The Legion of Doom. I just always thought that, you know, he did so well with the crime gangs, with the whole Sicilian mafia, and now all of a sudden the Legion of Doom is bringing in all these bad guys who have their own minions and stuff together. You know, how would that have happened if you had Francis Ford Coppola handling that? Or if he was handling, what's the name of that family in Batman, Mazzarelli family? You know,
You talk all the
when the gangs all got together under one thing.
Well, the thing is,
know,
that's the thing. When you look at filmmaking, that's the thing. When you look at superhero film as cinema, there's some challenges that weren't being met as we went along, like
Scale.
Not even the scale. I would think that's what I always bring up. I bring up that the problem with the superhero films was that you couldn't really have them run, because when you looked at Batman '66 and you see them running and the cape's still sort of flapping,
Right.
it's like it didn't work. So it's like, all right. And then when we look at Watchmen, they had some good scenes or slow-mo fights. But then when you start seeing running, I keep thinking Batman '66. So I'm like, oh.
Right, but it's fundamentally the character. I mean, we feel for Steve Trevor.
No.
We feel for
I'm talking about
Iron Man, and I think that it's just the
You
power
can
that
make-
they have imbued in them. It's just like you have the movies.
How
with
does that
the-
relate to what I was just saying?
I thought we were talking about in terms of scale.
I'm not talking about scale. I'm talking about the problems with superhero films, which Josh Whedon and Kung Fu Panda, the second one, the animated, said, how do you, that's what I was saying. When I was watching superhero films, and the idea of these team-ups, right, which is Marvel's doing too much of, is how do you make the group work? How do you make it look so it's not dull? And that's what you have to make these things. Like when the first Spider-Man movie came out, I didn't necessarily like the movie, but the hurdle that we had to get over is the web slinging. Is this going to be cool? Because we saw the one in the 70s with the web shooters on the outside. And I'm saying as a kid, but then you look at it, you know that this is going to, and they conquered that aspect of saying it looks believable. It's even more than what we envisioned because Spider-Man is moving so fast. And that's what we didn't understand exactly how fast he would be in real life.